All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining this public information session regarding the Client Action Planning Task Force overview of the town warrant articles for Climate Action Plan. This meeting is being held remotely as an alternative means of public access pursuant to an order issued by the Governor of Massachusetts dated March 12th, 2020, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. You are hereby advised that this meeting and all communication during this meeting may be recorded by the town of Hingham in accordance with the open meeting law. If any participant wishes to record this meeting, please notify the chair, me, at the start of the meeting in accordance with MGL Chapter 30A, Section 20F, so that the chair may inform all our participants of said recording. And it is being recorded. Sorry, I had to read the standard blurb, so you are all now notified that is in fact being recorded. As we go through this presentation, before we begin, just a couple of housekeeping items. So please mute your phones or your computers during the presentation. You can certainly at any time unmute yourself to ask a question, or if you want to use the raise hand feature, please do so, and I or one of the members of the task force can unmute you, and you can certainly ask any question. You're also welcome to use the chat feature. We'll try to be monitoring that during the presentation, although we're all going to be speaking at some point, so our apologies if we're not completely on top of it. But we're a pretty open group, so again, you're welcome to unmute at any point and ask a question. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. So our agenda this evening is to talk about, first off, who we are and how we got here, then talk about climate action plans generally. So what's the expectation for a climate action plan, what's in it, and what isn't in a climate action plan. Then we'll take a look at regional engagement. So what other towns and bodies in and near us in Hingham have been doing with regards to climate action planning and other climate work. And then we'll get into the articles and town meeting and what the recommended motions are. So by brief intro, just who we are. Again, my name is Brad Moyer. I'm joined by Kathy Reardon and Maria Zaid. We are members of the Climate Action Planning Task Force. My involvement began by my membership in the Energy Action Committee. Maria Zaid is a member of Cleaner Greener Hingham, and Kathy Reardon is a former select person and volunteer gadfly at large within Hingham, a super volunteer, as I like to describe her. And we were tasked by Tom Mayo to help bring forward a climate action plan to town meeting this year. So the original genesis was the Energy Action Committee had undertaken an effort to bring to town meeting a warrant article to approve the formation of a committee to undertake a net zero emissions goal by 2050. At the time, there was some concern that that warrant article needed to go a bit further and ask for monies to be associated with the development of a plan and to socialize it further to bring to town meeting. So under the auspices of town administration and Tom Mayo, the Climate Action Planning Task Force was formed. And as I indicated, Kathy, Maria, and I have been driving that forward. We also had help from Mary Savage Dunham while she was before her retirement from Hingham, as well as MAPC energy specialist by the name of Brooks Winter, both of whom were very instrumental in the work that has resulted in these warrant articles that we'll be speaking with you tonight. So with that said, let's jump into what a climate action plan is and what it isn't. And I think Maria is going to take us through this first portion. Thank you, Maria.
Sure. So for what is in a climate action plan, the first thing that this plan will need to determine is its goal, and the goal being the date by which we, Hingham, want to achieve net zero carbon emissions. Our task force identified a preliminary goal of 2040. However, the Climate Action Planning Committee may, in doing its work, determine that another date is feasible. So in in doing that process, the next thing that they're going to need to do is a carbon baseline determination. So that is an assessment of where we are in terms of our emissions, so that we can know exactly how much we need to reduce. So working with a consultant, the committee will identify and locate relevant data sources, complete a greenhouse gas emissions inventory, and then analyze and present those results. Then third point, strategy evaluation and cost benefit analysis. One of the jobs of this committee with the consultant will be to evaluate a wide range of strategies, both from and evaluate their efficiency, both from an emission standpoint and also from a financial standpoint. So there will be a cost benefit analysis as part of this piece, determining what is the cost of acting now versus acting later or not acting at all. The next step, the time scale for reduction across town sectors. I think it's important to understand that at the end of this plan, we won't be given a laundry list of things to do and 18 years to do them. We'll be given, or however many years it determines, we'll be given very clear, a very clear path to net zero and clear actions that need to be accomplished within the next 5 years. The last 2 points I think go together. So we view this document, this climate action plan, as being a living document and being something that is of service to the town and that the town can participate in. So the plan will provide information on existing or upcoming incentives, and other resources that will make it more attractive to residents and entities in town to make environmentally and wallet friendly decisions when they get to a decision point. And then the last point in terms of community engagement, I really want to stress that this is our plan, and that we as a community need to and must be engaged at every step of the process. So thank you for being here tonight. The plan will begin, or the planning of the plan will begin with a community input survey. There'll be 3 public input sessions where everyone will have opportunities to participate. There will be focus groups and roadshow meetings, and those will try to elicit input from both underrepresented groups and also key stakeholders. Also personal interviews with key stakeholders in the process. And so I would like to pass it to Kathy to talk about what is not an action plan.
So it's always interesting to try to talk about negatives. So, to think about this, this plan, as you see here on this bullet point, contains no legislation and it contains no mandates, which means that this plan is going to succeed through information and persuasion. And the process is going to include, as Maria was talking about, it'll be an open planning process, which we hope will lead to an overall mindset change and will also lead to integrating climate action concerns into decision-making processes throughout the town. So that's kind of how this whole process begins. The plan will make action recommendations, which will be implemented through normal channels. So any way that we do things in town, whether it's we're making expenditures or we're changing building codes or whatever, they'll be done the same way that we always do through the normal course of events. So that deals with their 3 top areas. The question of a predetermined plan path, it was interesting because the way I'm seeing this is that we can speculate on what is going to happen as a result of this plan. And we can speculate about exactly what will be in this plan, but through an open and diverse process and through outreach, as Maria described, and research, hopefully we will lead to a very good result. Another point to make about this is that the plan is not fixed until 2020. And again, Maria referred to this. It includes a review and updates through the various time scale, and it will take into account technological developments, state and US regulations that may change, and funding opportunities that may come to the town. So every recommendation that comes from this plan will need to be evaluated and will need to be made to suit the needs of the whole town. We will be able to be involved in its success or its failure, depending on how we participate. And I think that pretty much does it for this. Unless there's any questions. Brad, I think it's on to you.
Great, thank you, Kathy. So let's talk about what others are doing and how others have envisioned and used climate action plannings for their towns. A climate action plan can be somewhat of an elastic concept. It can contain many things, or it can be somewhat narrow. We've seen other towns across Massachusetts use climate action plans to help them chart transportation and mobility options. So not just moving to EVs, but also being encouraging greater use of public transportation within a town. A key one, of course, is incentivizing homeowners to move away from fossil fuels. Fossil fuels can account for about 30% of fossil fuel heating for homes can constitute about 30% of greenhouse emissions, typically in residential towns like Hingham. So incentivizing moving away from that is a common element. Certain towns may have restrictive zoning and permitting for clean energy, whether that's development or simply having solar arrays or using public land for clean energy generation. So a climate action plan can target that and help move towns to approve more favorable zoning regulations. And then it's a method also for prioritizing short versus long-term sustainability goals. Both Maria and Kathy made mention of this when we're talking about if our current goal is to move to net zero emissions by 2040. As Kathy indicated, sure, you could come up with a plan that has a predetermined path and a stage for every year and getting to 2040, but it risks being outdated very quickly. So you might want to take an approach that's going to prioritize more definitive actions that can be done in the short term, but then indicate longer term goals that can be revisited and updated and adapted as technology improves. So that's kind of like a brief window into how other towns can use it. And as I indicated at the outset, a cap can be a pretty elastic concept. One thing that I think it's important to note for Hingham when we talk about a climate action plan, we're really focused on clean energy and zero carbon emissions, so a net zero concept. Some towns might include mitigation measures. So Hingham's the seaside town. So are we taking climate mitigation measures to shore up the coastline? Are we doing things like that? Hingham has already undertaken a municipal vulnerability preparedness study back in June of 2019 to address some of those elements. So we're going to use our plan focused purely on a net zero target for carbon emissions. So with that, I'll turn it over to Maria.
Yeah, so one example for aligning with community goals is in Arlington. So Arlington's net zero action plan was designed, as it says, was designed to align with Connect Arlington. So Connect Arlington is a 20-year plan that that Arlington has undertaken to make all transportation modes within Arlington more sustainable. So their climate action plan was focused on that specific goal. And it has really been used to enhance that plan. Looking at Hingham's master plan, as Brad had mentioned, there are already so many climate goals embedded both explicitly and implicitly. Explicitly, goal number 2 is protect the environment and prepare for the impacts of climate change. And specifically mentions developing and exploring a path to net zero. So we feel that this plan is very tightly aligned with Hingham's master plan. And I just would say that also, throughout the whole master plan document, you can find other references to climate linked goals that I think could be touched upon in this plan, such as preserving historic trees and landscape features, enhancing public transportation and low carbon transport options, and providing incentives for reduced energy use. So these are all the goals that Hingham has already identified within their master plan. So a climate action plan is just another way of getting us closer to those predetermined goals. On to the next.
So Concord is really a very has done a lot of really interesting things, and I think what you see here aligns very much with how our thinking about this planning process. The planning process itself creates consensus, brings the community together, and we've tried to make sure that all members of the community are involved. And there'll be outreach sessions, and the committee itself is very broad, so that hopefully when they get to the end of it, there will be a lot of buy-in already to this plan. Another area in which Concord really has done some interesting things, they created a dashboard. And I looked on that dashboard today, and it had all kinds of interesting things, and it divided it into whether it was your home, whether it was your car, whether it was a business, and all the kinds of things that you could think about doing and resources to help you do them. One of the things that programs that they began was something called Clean Comfort. And again, I looked on the website for that, and this has actually been is being run by the Concord Municipal Light Plant. They actually have a professional administrator for this.
No,
program.
we're not going to.
And they're providing a tremendous amount of information for people and resources for people to tie into. So they're doing some really interesting things, and possibly, the kinds of things that we might be able to consider, considering the fact that we also have a municipal light plan. So they have really shown the value of collaboration across the whole town, that information and support is really, really important. And they also point to probably the need that we may consider, which is some kind of sustainability person or mechanism in some way that coordinates all this. And that's something that they have chosen to do, and may be a result of this plan as well as we go forward. Okay.
Great, thank you, Kathy. So facilitating the transition to clean energy, of course, is of paramount importance. As we identified for Hingham's Climate Action Plan, that is going to be the main focus of the plan's efforts. So when a town sets like a carbon neutrality or is at net zero goal, like we are trying to do with the warrant articles that are being proposed before town meeting, how do you get there? How does that transition work? And as Maria mentioned at the outset, something that is in a climate action plan would be facilitating and supporting through incentives and other mechanisms that transition. So Marshfield is an example of one town that through a grassroots volunteer effort that engendered town support, undertook a program that they called Heat Smart Marshfield. And basically, through their work, they're promoting, heat pumps, whether that's geothermal, so ground source heat pumps, or cold climate air source heat pumps, modern wood heating systems for in the home, and solar hot water. And what the volunteer group did is they went out, researched, and interviewed various vendors and providers of these items, negotiated reduced rates, and selected them as a means for residents to plug into in order to help transition their homes to these alternative clean energy sources. Another example is Solarize Plus Massachusetts. So Solarize Plus is a group purchase program for solar energy and solar hot water systems. So if you're going to put solar panels on your roof, either for general electric needs throughout the home or specifically tied to a hot water system. Different flavors of this have happened across Massachusetts. This one was a joint program that Salem, Swampscott, and the Hothead run together to encourage solar adoption within their communities. And then another example, we talked about zoning and permitting, as an option for climate action plans. And Watertown is an example where they took a rather strong step. So as Kathy highlighted at the outset of what isn't in a climate action plan when she said no legislative changes, but it could encourage zoning changes, Watertown took that to heart and had a zoning change mandating solar adoption on all new commercial buildings within the town. So they were the first town in all of New England to mandate or put a mandate in their zoning regulations of this type. So we use this as an example to show kind of one end of an approach to how you may go. And of course, there's a lot of in between with what zoning regulations can do as well for incentivizing and facilitating development here. So there's a lot of possibilities that a climate action plan would consider and raise within the town through the community engagement element that Maria had talked about earlier to see what would be best for Hingham. So with that, we'd like to move into the recommended motions. I will make one note though, we just highlighted a couple of examples of what towns have done on the Hingham Town website. There is a separate web page for the Climate Action Plan Task Force. And on that web page, there are other examples of climate action plans developed within Hingham. So you'll see Reading's plan there, Belmont's, Concord, as Kathy was speaking to, Dedham, Winchester, and Newton. And they all have done things slightly differently and in ways that is appropriate to their specific community. And again, like to emphasize, that's what we're looking to do here in Hingham through the development of this plan, is to develop that approach which works best for this town and its residents in working towards a net zero goal. So moving into the recommended motions, the original approach that the motions had taken and that were approved by the selectmen back in January, which was the warrant article submission deadline. And so the formal warrant articles that go before the town, there were 2 articles and they have been numbered now, articles 13 and 14. And the first article 13 was to establish a net zero goal, which was by 2040 or another target deemed feasible by the climate action planning body, as well as a request to raise a sum of monies to go forth and develop that plan. After these warrant articles were submitted and following conversations with the Hingham Municipal Lighting Plant, HMLP. HMLP has generously decided to fund the climate action planning effort in an amount of approximately $80,000. So this has rendered Article 13 moot in some respects because we no longer need the town to approve the raising of those funds. So when we are at town meeting and Article 13 is put forward, the recommended motion on that article will be to take no action because it is no longer necessary. And then Article 14, as originally proposed, was the establishment of a climate action planning committee that would be composed of a wide array of representatives of the town, both from existing town committees who have a stake in the climate action planning effort, as well as interested citizens who would be selected by both the selectmen or select board and the moderator, as is kind of traditionally done in other committees. And so that was the purpose of Article 14. That has been slightly modified to now include the mention of the goal of a net zero goal by 2040 or another target date deemed feasible. So what you see on this slide here is what the recommended motion will be for Article 14. So that will be, we don't want the original motion as proposed, we want the modified motion put forward by AdCom that will form that committee and designate its goal of 2040 or another date deemed feasible for net zero emissions. Kathy or Maria, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add to that.
Well said.
Nope.
Oh, thank you.
Sounds good.
So with that, that's what we wanted to take everyone through this evening. So what the work was done that the Climate Action Planning Task Force had undertaken, what considerations we were looking at as we develop a climate action plan, determining what we think will be in it for Hingham, what it's not going to do, pulling on examples of what we've seen within the town and through outreach that we've engaged in, just highlighting some things that are possible in a climate action plan. And then of course, what the motions are for a town meeting to get us to the next step. And assuming a favorable outcome at town meeting, it would be off to the races. We'd have to, of course, form the committee and rely on the designees from the various town committees, as well as the select board and the moderator, and then the RFP process to select a consultant for whom the generous 80,000 donation by HMLP would pay to help undertake the work of the planning effort. So with that, I'll open the floor to any questions.
I've got a couple of questions. First of all, from the point of the planning process itself, we're obviously looking for a vote. Where's the likely opposition to come from that might try to defeat this effort? I mean, it seems to me it's a no-brainer. And Hingham has been slow to do something in this regard already. So where's the opposition likely to come from, if any?
That's a great question. And I can certainly say that Kathy, Maria, and I think of it as a no-brainer as well. We've struggled to find opposition, I'm happy to say. And we've taken, I think, great pains to set this up in a manner such that there should be no opposition. What I mean by that, meaning that we don't need the town to expend any funds for this. It's already been generously donated. And by the way, I can say this, even though I'm not a member of the Hingham Municipal Lighting Plant Board or its staff, but there is not going to be anyone's impact on rates from HMLP funding this effort. They're able to fund this from a sale of energy credits that they undertook earlier last year. So that money is already available. So we've taken away any concern with the dollar raise for this. The other possible opposition I could see is people can always quibble on what's the appropriate target date. You say 2040, should it be 2035? Should it be 2045? Or what about 2050? You know, what are other communities doing? What is the Commonwealth of Massachusetts doing? Well, the goal is set up there because through our community engagement efforts, that was the most desired goal, but it's also 2040 or another target date deemed feasible. So the planning effort will evaluate that, and that goal could be moved up if it's feasible to do so, or maybe we can get to 80% reduction by 2040, but we need another 5 years in order to get to 100% reduction. So the planning process will have that level of flexibility. So I know you asked me what the opposition is, and I haven't answered that question because I'm struggling to think of what it could be. And
I have one.
Oh, you have one? Great, Maria, go ahead.
I do. So I would say that in speaking to people around town, I haven't encountered outright opposition, but I have definitely encountered hesitancy. So, and I think that comes from first the question of, are my rates going up when I say HMLP is paying for it? No. And then secondly, well, am I gonna have to change my heating system? Or do I have to sell my car? And so it's very clear if you're talking to people and you come up with those arguments, it's very important that you want to stress that, as Kathy said, this plan does not legislate, it encourages. It encourages and educates, and we hope that it will make making the quote unquote right decision also the attractive decision. But no one is going to be forced into, no private resident is going to be forced into a change that they may not be in a position to make.
One of my other questions had to do with the funding. My initial thought when I saw that the HMLP was going to fund this was that they were doing that to protect themselves. Who's actually managing the budget and controlling the purse strings of that $80,000?
Sure. So there's no formal agreement right now between the town and HMLP for the expenditure of that money. And that was something that we investigated whether that is necessary or the normal course of dealing between the town and HMLP for projects similar to this that they've funded in the past. And my understanding, as it's been relayed to me from town administration, is that the way this is being set up is typical for these types of arrangements between HMLP and the town. So while there's no formal arrangement, there typically is not. There is nothing that I'm aware of to suggest that there's anything untoward in why HMLP is funding this. Frankly, when they had sold their renewable energy credits last year, I'm not entirely sure of the exact amount. It was somewhere north of 500,000 in proceeds that they received. And they had committed at the time of that sale to use that monies to fund, or at least some of those monies to fund renewable energy projects in the town. So they see this as falling within that remit. And then lastly, you know, one thing that's common with climate action plans is the idea of electrification. You know, if you can generate clean, renewable energy at the source of the power generation, or I should say the power distribution, then electrifying at home is a way to ensure you have clean energy. And of course, it would be right up HMLP's business model if a lot of people used more electricity within the town. So they have an incentive there as well.
Can I just jump in on? I think one thing also is that the town will manage the RFP process for the consultant. So yep. They are not going to have any particular influence over who the town hires as the consultant for this process, and obviously spending the money that they've allocated. So, and I think in terms of the other thing that just occurred to me as Brad was finishing was that this is going to present both a challenge. I mean, it may to the light plant as well as an opportunity. So, you know, I think they can be commended for being willing to kind of step into this and take a role, because we can't do it without them.
So then I've seen two other hands. John, I saw your hand raised first, and then Jen after that. So if John, if you want to go ahead and ask your questions, then we'll go to Jen.
Okay, well, I have a question. I actually have a comment, an answer, and a question. And my comment is, I just want to thank you and Maria and Kathy from the bottom of my heart, and I think I speak for Hingham Net Zero as well, for all of the wonderful hard work you put in seeing this through and getting this across the finish line so that the townspeople can actually vote on this at town meeting. So I think your children and grandchildren are going to be very proud of you. I think you've given them a beautiful inheritance here. So congratulations. Thank you.
John, I just want to say
you.
thank you, and that's high praise coming from you, because I feel like a slacker compared to the work that you and Hingham Net Zero have done. So high praise
We're
indeed.
gonna arrange therapy for you, Brad. Anybody who spends as much time in town meetings as you do, you should not be using that kind of language to describe yourself. In terms of what Jay Devon said, I would concur with Maria. You know, we live in an age where it is politically fashionable to not trust government. And I think there's a certain number of people out there in the town that may view this as kind of a Trojan horse. And they say, well, sure, yeah, you're funded for the first year, and you're saying you're not going to mandate any changes, but how do we know what you're going to do in year 2 and year 3? And I don't know what to say to those people. Hopefully, there are not very many of those people. I think that the other people from Hingham Net Zero here who are here with me tonight, especially Elliot, for instance, Elliot Place, who's led our kind of our standout, our demonstration effort to promote this plan in the Warren article. We've gotten overwhelmingly positive feedback. Even on social media, where it's easy for people to take pot shots, there's been relatively little negativity. So I think those are really positive indicators. So if we do get pushback, I think it's going to be from those people who really don't trust town government, don't trust government at all. And then the question that I have, which is an item that I hope other people will be interested in, is, and it's a methodological question. We don't need to get deep in the weeds on this, but the whole idea of inventorying emissions strikes me as a very challenging thing to do. And I'm just wondering if you could say a few words about the methodology that you might use. And maybe there are average statistics out there per household, per business, per population, where you can kind of back into or calculate emissions. But if I don't, and I know you haven't tried to do this yet, so, but
No.
you've talked to other people, and I'm sure you're thinking about it. So anything that you could say that would elucidate us would be interesting at this point. And thank
Sure.
you.
Yeah. When I was preparing, I thought, how detailed do I want to be in this explanation? Because I might lose, like, ooh.
Don't get real detailed.
So
I'll feel guilty.
okay, so I'll try to explain it as best I have understood it. So because this is a large committee and this is a large technical undertaking, there will be a fair amount of leaning on consultants, because you need a professional who knows how to do this type of thing. And what the consultant will do is the consultant will know how to tap into various data sources that are in town, and there are tools available. I'm trying to see if I can find from our scope. I know one of them is called ClearPath. MEPC has designed their own tool. and was it
Mass
the
Energy
WHO?
Insight.
Mass Energy Insight, and then I think the WHO had one as well that was more, we decided was more focused on cities. So there are existing inventory tools out there that you can plug data into. That said, I mean, I can't imagine this is going to be an exact number.
Sure,
That
you can't.
just doesn't seem feasible to me, but it will be the best that we can get.
Where
That
we,
makes sense. You can't count the beans, obviously.
we
So,
do have,
Yeah, I mean,
there
we
are,
can't count the person who's driving from Norwell through, you know, we can
Right.
try, we can approximate, but
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, transportation is the trickiest, I think, of the bunch. Home energy use can be surprisingly accurate in that all investor-owned utilities are required to upload their usage information into Massachusetts's, Mass Energy Insight tool. An HMLP, though not mandated, voluntarily uploads its information to that system as well. So all electricity generation and all natural gas usage are tracked within the borders of Hingham.
Oh,
Uh,
terrific.
yeah, so then it's exactly, so that gets us a long way, but then oil-based heating is a challenge because that information is not uploaded. And then also transportation within the town. How do you count cars coming through and out, and how much do they emit? What general assumptions do you make about how many MPGs, you know, how many electric cars and so forth? And that's where a lot of the tools that Maria was mentioning are there to kind of help use some type of baseline, you know,
Right.
for that.
Thank you.
Great. So Jen, Lincoln, you were next, and then Jessica G, I see your hand up as well. So after Jen.
Thank you. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. Right. I have a couple questions from my understanding. First of all, that 80K is for the consultant, correct? I mean, that's earmarked for that contract.
Correct.
Okay. And so it is feasible because it's an RFP that it may come in less for the project, right? I mean, someone has to bid, or it may come in more.
Correct. So there were, to get to that 80K, MAPC assisted the task force in getting to the point where we are. And part of the request to them was, can you please scope out the development of climate action plan for Hingham, all of the tasks necessary to do that and associated dollar amounts. And after several back and forths with MAPC, we came to a plan that would generate basically 80,000 in cost for consultants' time.
Okay, and so the idea is they'd be on this project for a year or 18 months. I'm sorry if I missed that.
No, I'm sorry, we didn't give a time frame.
Okay.
So we scoped out the total number of hours that would be expected, but not necessarily the time frame. The working assumption is that whatever the outcome of that plan is, will likely require action by some town bodies. That could be another town meeting vote to appropriate funds. It could be planning board for zoning changes. It could be a capital outlay for additional funding. It could be select board for different types of approvals or what have you. And so we would, if we start this summer, we would try to have that plan lined up and ready by the fall of 2022 in time for that cycle of approvals.
Okay, and the CAP committee, is that all volunteers? Forgive my ignorance.
So it would be, so the members of the different town committees that would be selected for this, they're being asked to offer up a member.
Right.
They are volunteers of those respective committees. The school committee, they're
Right.
elected. Everyone else, and the municipal lighting plant board are elected as well. Everyone else, I believe, are volunteers. And then there would be additional citizen volunteers selected by the select board and moderator.
Okay, and just one more question. I look at the, you know, the bullets of what is generally included in a CAP, and you know, it seems very infrastructure based, you know, transportation. And I appreciate what you said about, you know, you want it to be measurable. And Right. I mean, I understand some of these are a bit subjective when I look at them. Is it possible for it to go other place? I mean, one of the first things I think about is animal husbandry initiatives. Is it, something I'm interested in land use? Is it feasible that, I don't know, it then goes to the schools and talks about, maybe you should be serving, why not, bivalves, something more sustainable. Is it possible that basically something else that we haven't discussed could work its way in here, or, outings to go plant trees, it's a net
I think
after all.
This plan was very focused on the net zero goal.
Right.
And so those type of initiatives, while very worthwhile, probably don't have as much of a place in this plan.
I think that said, the planning committee can probably investigate most anything if they really think it's worth it. I mean, I don't think we're trying to put any kind of a muzzle on the committee. I think we're just trying to lay out what at least some of the likely things at which they are going to want to get into. But they will act on their own, and if they see something that they think has big impact on the net zero goal, it might not be any of the things we've mentioned.
Yeah.
Although there could be certain tie-ins, Jen, to what you're talking about. So you bring up animal husbandry. Well, Weir River Farm is
Right.
within the borders of Hingham, and methane gas production is something that comes from animal waste. If that animal waste and methane production is occurring within Hingham, it is something that should be accounted for, in trying to achieve a net zero goal. That would become part of the baseline. So how do you reduce that emissions, or can you cause some kind of carbon sink alternative to capture that?
Right. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, Brad, could I just note, I think there are also grassroots organizations in Hingham that are going to be seeking to pursue these kinds of goals that are aligned with net zero. The plan has to necessarily go after the big ticket items. It has to go after the big sources of emissions and attack those. But there are a lot of people, for instance, who are interested in composting, for example. And I know in Hingham Net Zero, there are a lot of people who are doing that and who are interested in pushing those things forward. So, I think what we imagine is the plan plus a whole bunch of other initiatives moving forward, and all of which will be, additive. And so that the plan might not focus on them, everything, but collectively we'll get it done. And so I would urge you to keep pushing on what your interests are, because your interests are shared by other people in the town, and they're really worthwhile. They may not be as big as electric vehicles, for instance, or transportation emissions, but they're all worthwhile, and I think you'll find allies.
And if you're interested in composting, that is tomorrow night's Zoom, and the DPW is offering discounted earth machines. So just saying.
There you go.
Great. Thank you, John. Jessica G, I see your hand up. Do you have a question or would like to say something?
Hi, thank you for the presentation. That was really helpful to get an overview. I had two questions that Jen touched on one of them. And I'm assuming that there is a document that we can look at that has the proposal. Is it just what's in the town warrant, or is there another document as well?
So the town warrant is the actions that'll be undertaken. On the town website, there are multiple materials charting the work that the task force has done. And if there's anything that you're looking for that you don't see, I've got plenty of files locally stored that I can make available. So you can simply reach out to me and I'd be happy to give you anything.
Sure. And these questions maybe on the documentation, so that's why I was, is the study group configuration already established, or is that up in the air and going to be determined after town meeting? Granted that this will be passed, I hope so. And my second question, just so you can kind of allocate time as appropriate, is there a position on natural gas that Net Zero has, or is that something that is open-ended at this point?
Shall I maybe go on the committee? The committee has been defined in terms of the representations of town boards, but then there are open spaces for people at large who express interest. So the individual people's names are not in there, but in some cases when they are representatives of town boards, they are limited to somebody who is a representative of that town board.
Right. I just know like the school committee itself recently got added to, I think, advisory committee or some big committee that we would have thought, oh, wouldn't the school committee have a representative? But they didn't. So I was just wondering if that was already defined, just to make sure there wasn't some group that got eliminated somehow or just forgotten.
I don't think that's the case, and the school committee definitely
No.
is obviously going to have a representative.
Great, that's nice to hear, because they
Absolutely.
will be dealing
They've
with
got
everybody in the
tons of
future.
buildings and all kinds of issues that they're going to be concerned about.
And then to your, I'm sorry, Maria, if you were going to jump in, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
No,
off.
it's okay. Go ahead.
Just to your second point about natural gas. So nothing has been predetermined. And to Kathy's earlier point, even if the three of us had very strong notions about what the planning committee should do, they could ignore us and should not be bound by anything we have to say, because it's really the effort of that group to undertake this de novo and do what they think is best for the town. So could there be a place for natural gas in the climate action plan? Certainly there could. Could there be a plan to eliminate all natural gas usage at some point within the town of Hingham? Certainly there could. How that would happen, if it would happen, the stages that would be undertaken, that would all be determined by the next body with the work from the consultant.
Thank you.
Any other questions then? I'm looking for other hands and not seeing anybody, but you don't need to use the hand feature. You can simply unmute and speak. That's not a problem. Yeah.
John, I think had his
John.
hand up.
Well, Brad and the other members of the task force, it might be helpful to just talk for a minute about whether it would be appropriate for people who are on the call or people who are not on the call but interested to make their interests known to the Board of Selectmen or the moderator, and basically say, as you are deciding who to appoint, please consider me, and maybe submit their credentials or resume or whatever. I think I'll ask you, but do you agree that they would want to solicit and have sort of broad participation, at least for people who want to be considered?
Absolutely. I'm sorry, Kathy, go ahead. Yep.
The town warrant always has, I haven't looked in the back, but I'm assuming it's in there, always has an application form for anybody who wants to be on any town committee, and they can indicate exactly what they're interested in.
Great.
So anyone who wants to be a part of this committee certainly should consider doing that, whether the moderator or the Board of Selectmen will also maybe seek out their own ideas possibly, but anybody who's interested should just fill out that form and get it into them.
And then, Brad, I just have a comment on Jessica's question about natural gas, and that is, I think it's pretty clear we can't mandate people to scrap perfectly serviceable heating and cooling systems. I think what we're imagining in Hingham Net Zero is that if you think of the 10,000 or so accounts that the light plan has, well, if you think of those as either households or businesses, a certain percentage of those are going to be coming up on decisions about replacing old plant, old infrastructure for HVAC. And at that point, those are the opportunities through education and persuasion to help people make a decision that's more future oriented and frankly also more cost effective. That's been my personal experience. But having said that, I think the challenge that we're going to face is I'm not sure we have the contractor network available to us right now to be able to pull that off. And I think Marshfield's initiative is very interesting to me. I think we're going to need to, I think the plan will probably get us into some of those kinds of activities of outreach to HVAC contractors and try to arrange a network, a trusted network where they will be willing to extend discounts and also importantly can handle the volume that we see coming at them in the next years as more and more people make these decisions. And that might be an opportunity for partnering with other towns in the area or certainly with the state, because the state's going to be struggling with the same issues. Yeah, we want to move everybody heat pumps if possible. Do we have enough contractors with the knowledge and the expertise and the crews to be able to do that? I think that's going to be a big challenge.
Yeah, and John, just to follow up on that, thank you. Your earlier point is certainly apropos in that regard when you mentioned that other groups will need to be involved with their interest to supplement the work of this committee. Because whenever you have a town chartered committee, you are constrained by ethics obligations within the state from recommending specific private enterprises.
Right.
We faced this issue several years ago when the Energy Action Committee was evaluating a program called Solarize Hingham, where we attempted to bring in a solar developer to provide incentives for adding solar arrays on top of homes. And the Energy Action Committee, while obviously very favorable of that type of program, couldn't provide any level of endorsement because of state restrictions. So the Marshfield example where you had a group of volunteers who did all that work and came up with the recommendation, that's viable in that case because it's a volunteer group not constrained by those obligations of the state.
Right.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? I'm just scanning the Zoom
Jessica,
tiles.
did you have another question or do you still have your hand up?
I think I just still have my hand up, but I can lower it.
Impressive.
Sorry about
Okay,
that.
I'm
I
still
guess,
learning
but
how to raise my
was
hand.
I was thinking, how can we help you to promote just by promoting the approval of this warrant on social media? Is there anything specific that we can help with?
Tell your friends, May 8th, 2 p.m.
Right. Send
Sounds
out
good.
bunches of emails.
Yeah, everyone you know, May 8th, 2 p.m., get a babysitter. It'll be a beautiful day, we hope. Enjoy being outside and vote correctly.
While these presentations are recorded and there are many podcasts and other Hingham media appearances we're doing, I hesitate to ever recommend anyone send a video of me yammering for about an hour, but that is an option if you're brave enough.
Harbor Media. We did an interview with Harbor Media. We'll be making this available. If there's a Facebook group called a Sustainable Hingham, where there'll be that has more information on it. But really, the best way you can help us is just by telling everyone you know to support the plan. And
So
vote.
Elliot,
Hingham Net Zero is gonna have another standout right in front of Starbucks on Lincoln Street there, the corner of Downer Ave, Thaxter, and 3A. On Saturday morning, 10 a.m. You're welcome to join us. We'll have signs out for a climate action plan and go to town meeting.
Do you still have lawn signs available?
Oh, yeah.
Yep, you can have a lawn sign, Jessica. You can write postcards to your neighbors all through Hingham Net Zero.
Yep.
But really, if all of that sounds like a lot, just tell everyone you know.
All right, I'm not seeing any more hands, so I'll ask for one more call for questions or comments. And seeing none, I think we can conclude. I just want to thank everyone for spending an hour with us this evening. I know there's a lot going on, and your questions and support means a tremendous amount to Kathy, Maria, and I, and everyone else who cares about this topic for our town. So thank you very much for attending, your support, and please let us know if there's anything else we can do to help you as you spread the word or consider this a town meeting.